Hey baddies, we want to take a quick minute to shout out our amazing sponsor, Eli Lilly, for supporting our mission here on Baddie to Baddie. Because of their generosity, we can keep these important conversations about breast cancer awareness, education, and advocacy going strong for our community of women of color. We send our sincere thanks to our partners at Eli Lilly for standing with us. Calling all permanent makeup artists. Discover how you can join our mission to empower breast cancer survivors of color with specialized permanent makeup services. It's more than makeup, it's a movement. Connect with us and find out how you can contribute to this empowering cause by visiting baddiebeautycollective.com. In return, you will receive free breast health education, permanent makeup trainings, and much more. The Baddie Beauty Collective is brought to you by For the Breast of Us, Artistry by Zuri, and PM Yukon. If you're a breast cancer survivor looking to boost your confidence and add a bit of swag to your new normal, this is your invitation to explore free and discounted permanent makeup services by artists trained in the specifics and nuances of skin for women of color. From eyebrows to 3D areola and scar transformation, join us and let your journey of empowerment begin. Check out the Baddie Beauty Collective, brought to you by For the Breast of Us, Artistry by Zuri, and PM Yukon by visiting baddiebeautycollective.com.
Welcome to Baddie to Baddie, a monthly podcast by For the Breast of Us, the first breast cancer community for all women of color, where we share real-life experiences, information, and education to help you live your best life after a breast cancer diagnosis. Welcome to Baddie to Baddie. Welcome to Baddie to Baddie. Hello, welcome to another episode of Baddie to Baddie. My name is Marissa. I am the co-founder and CEO of For the Breast of Us, a community for women of color who have been impacted by breast cancer. And I am joined today by one of the OG Baddie ambassadors, I would say, also a good friend of mine, Veronica. Hey girl, hey, how are you doing?
Hey girl, hey, I'm doing well. I'm glad to be here.
Yes, thank you. So we're wanting to highlight, for Hispanic Heritage Month, Hispanic baddies who are in our community, patient advocates, survivors, thrivers, and previvors, just to see, what it's like for them within the breast cancer community, how they advocate, all that kind of good stuff. And I know that you've been in the community for a while, so I definitely wanted to pick your brain and let people get to know you. But before we get started and I ask you some questions, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Veronica, and I live in San Antonio, Texas. I was diagnosed in January of 2020 with invasive ductal carcinoma. It was stage 2B. I was ER/PR positive, HER2 negative, and I opted for a single mastectomy at that time and went through active treatment during the peak of the pandemic, which was always a very challenging time when it came to connecting with the community. And after that full year, I started looking at reconstruction options and determined that I wanted to go with an aesthetic flat closure. That was in part due to For the Breast of Us connecting me with other flatty baddies, which I was very appreciative of. Yeah. And so I had that aesthetic flat closure, and now I am a flatty baddie in the community.
And one of the things that I love is you call yourself not like a flat advocate, but more like a choice advocate. So can you explain that a little bit to everybody?
Yes, I definitely at the very beginning, I started saying, oh, I'm a flat advocate because that's what I thought was the term. And then as I started to get more involved with different communities, I realized that it wasn't so much about being flat, but it was about having choices. I think there are a lot of choices out there for women, whether it is a lumpectomy, whether it's, to stay unilateral with just a single mastectomy, whether you have implants or deep reconstruction, deep flap, and there's other kind of flap reconstructions and aesthetic flat closure. And even with aesthetic flat closure, there's Goldilocks closure, which gives you a little bit of tissue. And so for me, I really wanted to make sure that people understood that there were choices out there and you can do whatever feels best for you. And most importantly, that it is your choice. It is an individual choice. It's not the choice of your partner. It's not the choice of your mother or your sweet aunt that wants to tell you what the right thing is to do. And so I really just wanted to make sure that people had that choice. And sometimes people end up flat because they didn't have the choice. Like maybe they had a failed reconstruction. And I have some very close friends that happened to them. And now they're going through the process of getting reconstruction. And I know they're torn about like being in the flat community for so long and now not going to be there. But to me, they are still always going to be my flat sisters, whether they have reconstruction or not. It's just a connection that I've built with them.
Yeah. And so in terms of like women of color, especially Hispanic women, do you find that you're getting more women of color who are reaching out to you, whether they're trying to decide if they want to go flat or just asking you about your experience?
I am in San Antonio, so there is a heavy Hispanic population here in San Antonio. And as I was talking to my oncologist and my breast surgeon more and more about the things that I was doing with For the Breast of Us and other organizations, they really saw that as an opportunity to connect with Hispanics and Latinas that were their patients. And, a lot of times there's a language barrier when it comes to healthcare. If there is not the physicians and they have people who can speak Spanish, but you don't get that feeling when you talk to somebody one-on-one. And I don't say that I'm fluent in Spanish, but I can get my point across and I can figure it out and get there. I understand Spanish, but I wanted to make sure that those patients have resources. And so I've been able to provide resources, not to the oncology offices that they can provide, but also the physician assistant that I work with now. She reaches out to me pretty regularly and says, I have a patient that's considering, going flat. Would you mind talking to her? She's, a Latin descent, and she just wanted somebody that looks like her to be able to talk to. So I'm glad that I'm that resource for the oncology center.
Yeah, I love that. Now, have you, in terms of your culture and, the way how you, were brought up, have you had any barriers when it comes to, your breast cancer experience and then also just survivorship now?
I think that when I was first diagnosed, anybody who's facing a breast cancer diagnosis or any cancer diagnosis, I think for that matter, they start to get asked a lot of questions about your background, your family history, your medical history. And in the Hispanic community, especially in my family, it's just not something that we talked about a lot. We might know that somebody was sick, or I knew that my aunt died, I knew my grandmother passed away, and it was always of these other things like, oh, she had a stroke, or, oh, she was sick and, malita is what they, oh, she was malita and she passed away or something.
Right.
And I don't think that we ever knew the specifics. I had one aunt in particular that we knew she had cancer because she went through chemotherapy. She had the visual effects of cancer that people are used to seeing, romanticized on TV and in movies. So when I got diagnosed, I didn't really know my medical history, my family's medical history. And so I reached out to a cousin of mine who is in nursing, and I started picking her brain, and we started to kind of map out that history of our family. And so now I have it, and I have reached out to all my cousins and said, okay, God forbid this ever happened to you, but if it does, I have this medical history now. So when you have to answer this. Right. And I was very vocal with my family on what was going on with me. I just opened the gates and was like, I'm going to tell you, with family sometimes too, it's like I would tell my parents and they would tell their siblings. So my aunts and uncles would know something. And by the time it trickled down to cousins, the story was completely different on what I was either doing or not doing. And again, it was during the pandemic, so I wasn't seeing people. It was all just via text or messages. So I finally made a cousin group chat so that I could tell the cousins directly, this is what's happening to me. And then the information would flow the other way. And so hopefully more accurate information is out there. And I think that, you know, I've connected with a lot more of my family. It's just kind of opened that up, and they know, and they know that I am a resource now. And so now when they have somebody, I'm that go-to person, that go-to cancer person that I know you probably are as well. It's like, when somebody gets diagnosed, you're like, can I connect you with this person? I'm like, yes, you can send them to me.
Now for, you know, any, you know, Latinas who are being recently diagnosed, whether that be early stage or metastatic, and they are worried about how they should tell their family or how to approach it with their family members, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them just to be, you know, very transparent and be honest, but share what you feel most comfortable sharing. You know, share what it is that you feel that you know, this is your story. You own the story, and I wanted to own my story. I didn't want aunts and uncles telling something that wasn't accurate. So that's why I was very vocal. Some people are not like that and they want to keep it private. So, but I would say, you know, specifically to get your medical history, I think it's important to say what you need and why you need it, because it'll help you in your treatments as you go forward to help determine your treatments. It could help you with genetic, you know, testing and how that also affects generations to come. And so for me, I felt like we have to change that generational stigma sometimes that comes around illness. And so to me, I really think that it's important, and I do encourage people to do it, but I also want to be respectful if it's something that they don't feel comfortable. Maybe they're not close to their family.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely some good advice, because, you know, even in my family or in our communities too, everybody's kind of hush hush or they don't want to say anything. And I'm like, hey, well, let's talk about that. Let's not be like, you know, the generation before us where everything was like, let's be quiet about it. Like, no, we're going to be different.
Yes.
One of the things that I love about you is that you advocate with all different types of groups. You know, I know that you started out with For the Breast of Us. I know you do a lot with the Breasties and some other organizations as well. And so what kind of advice would you have just to anybody, especially women of color who are wanting to, you know, dip their toes in the advocacy streets, as I would say?
I would say to try a lot of different things and a lot of different groups, because there are so many out there and they're all filling different voids that are out there in the community. And I have talked to a lot of different organizations, and I work with the ones that I feel best meet my needs as well. I do feel like after my diagnosis, I have become a very I don't want to say selfish, but more self-minded person about what is filling my cup. And so organizations like For the Breast of Us does that, because I'm able to connect with women of color and share the stories and amplify our voices and talk about those things. The Breasties, I work mostly with the BIPOC community there. So again, women of color, people of color, and I am a community leader in that specific group. And again, that's something that speaks to me. I have talked to other organizations, and I got training for one, which I've attended some of their virtual classes, but when I attended, I was like, ooh, it didn't feel right to me. I was like, it was nice and I liked it. There was nothing wrong with it, but it didn't speak to my heart. And so then I was asked to be a leader for their virtual programs. And I went to the trainings, and then I said, you know what, there was something about it that just didn't feel right to me, and I didn't want to force it. So again, I would say there's just so many things, because now, like when I was in active treatment, everything was virtual, but now there's in person, there's, you know, virtual still, there's art healing, there's all kinds of things. And so I would definitely say, participate in everything to see what it is that is your calling, and then start to, you know, immerse yourself in that to see if it really is something that you enjoy doing.
Right. And I think one of the things that I try to tell people as well, too, it's like, you know, sometimes your needs change, you know, sometimes maybe, you know, you start out with one place and then you're like, okay, well now, it's kind of like relationships and like dating, right? It's like, okay, well, this served me for this purpose now, but maybe it's time for me to move on somewhere else. And then maybe you'll
Yes.
go back and it's okay to do that as well.
There's definitely seasons for things like that.
Yeah.
I think too, because I connected so quickly with the online community because of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I was very intentional this year to start getting more connected with the local community and San Antonio community. And I reached out to a group, and they do some monthly meetups for dinners, and I went ready, and I was like ready to say, okay, what are we going to do? What are we advocating for? What are we learning?
Right.
And it was a chill group. They just want to get together for dinner and eat and chat. They barely talk about cancer, and they just basically have a drink, have some food, and socialize with each other. And I thought, well, this is weird. Like, I'm just like, it was very different for me that there was no action item when we left there. And so I thought, is this what I want? And I thought, well, I think I do. And so then I started to go, and I've gone almost every month that they've had them. And it's kind of fun just to connect with other people, but not to have cancer at the forefront of what we're doing. But we all know that we've had cancer in one way or the other.
Right. Yeah. And not any like quote unquote like advocacy work either.
No. So a very social group in which I've really come to enjoy as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, advocacy burnout is a thing. You've been, in this community for about 4 years now. And so for, especially for me, like it kind of like ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's higher, some days it's lower. Sometimes it could just be, middle ground. But for yourself, how do you deal with advocacy burnout?
I really think that I take a step back when I need to. I just pay attention to myself, and I work in the healthcare industry as well. And part of my job is being an editor for marketing materials and fundraising materials. And today I had a document that they wanted me to review, and it was about the breast health services. And they didn't send it to me because I'm a breast cancer. They sent it to me because that's my job to edit these articles before they get sent to a magazine. And when I was reading it, I was like, and it's for an article that's going to be in for Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I was like, are we already there? And I'm already reading these articles, and I already started to feel that heaviness. And I thought, well, one, this is part of my job, so I'm going to have to get over that piece of it. Feeling that I do feel like I do get into a slump right after October, because it is a very bombarding you with all kinds of messaging, and it's everywhere. And so I usually take that step back over the holidays and really use that to re-engage with myself, with my family, enjoy the holidays, and then kind of hit the road again fast in January to kind of say, okay, what's next? What am I doing?
Yeah.
But yeah, I just kind of listen to myself, and I do feel like I ebb and flow sometimes. Sometimes I'm out there just posting things and trying to stay connected. And then sometimes I'm like, ooh, I haven't posted like in 2 weeks or something. But it is what it is. I don't feel like I have to be out there all the time now, because unfortunately there's so many of us with breast cancer that are out telling stories. And so I know that there's information that's being shared, and I'm grateful for the community that's always willing to tell their story and pay it forward.
Yeah. I mean, I personally love watching your stories because those always make me laugh. So I at least love those for the most part. Speaking of that, like Shake Your Booty Friday. So where did that come from? For everybody that's watching, Veronica, usually on Friday, she posts in her stories or sometimes on her feed, Shake Your Booty Friday. I love it because it kind of gets you ready for the weekend. You kind of relax, let your hair down. But like, where did that come from?
So that actually started with my son when he was probably in middle school, and he's, in his late 20s now. But when he was in middle school, it was my way to get him up during the day, get him up for school. And we had like Tambourine Tuesday, whistling Wednesday. I don't even remember what Thursday was, but we had Shake Your Booty Friday. And so I would do that. I would do a little dance in his room for him, make him get up out of bed, and he would roll his eyes as any middle schooler would do. And I just continued to do it. And so it just became a thing. And even now, like when he moved to a different city, I don't do it every Friday, but every once in a while I'll find a funny clip and I'll send it to him. Or, if his birthday falls on a Friday, it's especially a Shake Your Booty birthday Friday or stuff. So it started with him, and it was just something that I continue to do, and it just brings me joy. I dance almost every day. I don't even realize I'm dancing, but I dance every day. Even if my joints hurt or whatever from side effects, I just feel like I have to move every day.
Yeah, that's probably one of the things that I remember at the retreat, with you dancing like at least once a day, which I love.
I love
it. Well, before we wrap up, there's a couple other questions that I wanted to ask you. One of the things that I wanted to ask is, what advice do you have for other organizations like For the Breast of Us or any of the other ones, about, ingraining and getting more Hispanic and Latina people into our organizations and involved?
I would say to just make sure that you're portraying yourself as someplace that's welcoming. I think that a lot of Latinas and Hispanics can sometimes, we're definitely not shy, but there's definitely this apprehension when it comes to reaching out or making the first move. And so when you are advertising or you're putting materials out there, make sure that you're connecting with the community. If your marketing materials look like nothing, like don't look like us, if it's all older white women, it's not going to be appealing to women of color. It's going to be intimidating. And so I think that that's important for organizations to do. I think providing information in Spanish is also helpful, because there are a lot of individuals who, English is not their first language. So when you have materials that can be translated into other languages, such as Spanish, I think that that's very helpful as well. And, if you're at events and you're doing, just say hello and make sure that you're reaching out and making people feel welcome, because I think that's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that I got from you too, which we're in the process right now, is, turning a lot of our materials that we bring to conferences and things, into Spanish as well, just to make sure that we're, expanding our reach and, reaching the communities that we want to reach. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. So thank you.
You're welcome.
My last question is kind of a funny question, or a fun one anyways, but if you could have dinner with one Hispanic or Latina icon, who would it be and why?
I feel like I'm cheating. I feel like Eva Longoria, because I just feel like she's funny, and she's from, South Texas, from Corpus Christi. Her sister and my sister are actually friends. And so I feel like I'm right on the bubble of being in her circle. And and I just get to see this other side of her sometimes because of that relationship that my sister has with her sister. And I'm just like, she's just so funny and down to earth, and she's so talented, and she's so such an advocate and a force for the Latina community, and just the roles that she does, the movies that she's in, the way she advocates, her political stances. It's just somebody that I think that I'd want to connect with.
Yeah, I know. I loved her at the DNC last week. I was like, oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Veronica, for sitting down with me real quick so we could take some time to get to know you a little bit better. As always, you know that I love you and I appreciate you. So thank you so much that you do, not only for the Breast of Us, but the breast cancer community as a whole.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I love being a Baddie ambassador, and I love you. And so I was glad to be here.
Thank you. And for everybody that's watching and listening, don't forget to subscribe to Baddie to Baddie wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and also on YouTube. And make sure to follow For the Breast of Us on Instagram and Facebook. Have a good day, everybody. This is another Baddie creation brought to you by For the Breast of Us. Don't forget to subscribe to Baddie wherever you get your podcasts. And follow us on Facebook and Instagram at For the Breast of Us, on Twitter at The Breast of Us, and check us out online at breastofus.com. Thanks for listening.